How's it going, everyone? Taki here. This is going to be a tutorial video for the new SUPER5 OLED Touch Standard Upgrade Kit. Starting out with the package contents, we have a screw organizer, a DIY toolbox filled with all the tools that you'll need for this installation, a suction cup, a Pelican case with your screen and some cables, and a replacement metal shield. There are a few ways that you can go about doing this installation, including the way that we did in the last guide. The touch version of the SUPER5 OLED upgrade has one more cable that we need to worry about, and it does make the last installation that we did in the first video a bit more complicated to do. That's the way that I personally do this installation, but that's not the way that I'm going to show you how to do this mod upgrade because it is more difficult. For that reason, I'm going to go ahead and do one of the alternative ways of doing this upgrade, and that is going to be by doing a shell swap. I'm going to be doing this mod with a metallic gray switch light. This case is pretty beat up, so I'm going to use this opportunity to go ahead and do a shell swap, which will allow me to save a lot of time doing this installation. If your case is not in good condition and it's not worth reusing, then doing a shell swap is going to make the entire installation much easier for you. If this shell was worth keeping, we'd have to do a complete teardown on this, including removing the display from the front half, but when we're just going to do a shell swap, we don't have to do any of that. We just need to take out all of the internal components and move it over to a new shell. So in that way, we save the step of having to remove the display. Before you start doing this installation, you're going to want to go ahead and power off your switch light, and then you're going to want to get all of your tools ready. And if you follow this guide and use it in the same way that I do, your installation is going to be very simple. Depending on when you're watching this video, your kit may have only one screwdriver with multiple bits, or two like I have here. The first thing you're going to want to do is turn your switch light over to the back, get your Y tool bit, and then remove the 4 screws on the back and put them inside your screw organizer. After that, you're going to go ahead and switch to your other screwdriver or your other screwdriver bit, and then take off the 2 screws on the top and the 2 screws on the bottom. Make sure all of your screws for this are inside the first slot, and then you can go ahead and close that. We won't be needing that for a while. At this point, we need to go ahead and pry open this shell, and you can use the guitar pick or this blue tool. You can go ahead and put this inside the speaker hole and then twist it to loosen up some of the clips on the side. Using that same pry tool, go ahead and loosen up the clips on both sides of the device. Once you have the clips on the sides and the bottom, you can go ahead and lift up on the bottom while holding down on L2 and R2, and then you can push the shell up and over. In this case, my R2 button came off, but you can just go ahead and put that back in if that happens to you. With the back shell off, the next thing that we need to do is remove this metal plate. There are 4 screws that secure this in place. 3 of them are silver, and the 4th one has a greenish tint over here on the left side. Go ahead and remove all of those. Put all of these screws inside the second compartment in the screw organizer, and you can go ahead and close that. Depending on if you've ever opened up your switch light before, this metal plate can have very strong clips on the side here, so you're going to go ahead and lift from the left side to the right and make sure that you're gentle so you don't damage any of those clips. This one came free without too much trouble. With that off, I'm going to go ahead and set this off to the side. With the metal plate off, the next thing that we're going to need to do is go ahead and remove the battery. To do that, you're going to go ahead and lift up this cable over here on the bottom next to the USB port. Pull it out. And then you can use your ESD tweezers, your screwdriver, or any other tool to go ahead and pry up on the battery connector. From here, we're going to go ahead and remove 10 screws that are all the same size, starting out with the 3 that hold the heatsink in place. When it comes time to remove the heatsink, you're going to go ahead and get your pry tool and push up on the adhesive material that is on the top of the fan. And once you've done that, you can go ahead and lift up on the heatsink itself, making sure not to bend the heat pipe. Go ahead and set this down on the metal plate. Next, we're going to go ahead and remove the 7 screws holding the cartridge slot and the 3.5mm headphone jack in place. Once you have all the screws free, go ahead and lift up on the latch and pull this assembly out. The next thing that we're going to do is go ahead and remove the screen, and I want to emphasize that there's really only one point of failure in this entire installation, and it is the MIPI connector for the display. You want to make sure that you are very careful with this because it can break, and if it does break, then you're going to need to replace this PCB component yourself or with a service. Hold the switch in your hand and use your fingernail to gently pry up on the connector and then disconnect the display cable. After that, you're going to go ahead and lift up on the touchscreen connector. And then you're going to go ahead and use your screwdriver or your ESD tweezers that came with the kit to go ahead and free the cable. This next part is entirely up to personal preference, but I am going to now work from left to right disassembling the motherboard and the daughter board so we can swap those over to our new shell. And just be aware from this point forward, we have 3 different screws, 2 that have the same color but different sizes, and a third one that is the green tinted one that we've already dealt with before. We're going to start off in the top left hand corner with the ZR button and the green screws that hold it in place. Once you have that out, go ahead and move down to the third green screw that's next to the analog stick connector. Then move down to the fourth screen connector on the bottom corner. And the fifth one that holds the speaker in place. All of these can go inside the same compartment. Take your ESD tweezers, lift up on the analog stick connector, and then gently pull out the ribbon cable. Next, we're going to be in the middle over here next to the fan. There is a tiny screw underneath the fan connector, and then there are 2 more that are next to the USB Type-C port. All of these are the same size screws, and they're going to go inside the same compartment. Next, take your ESD tweezers, lift up on the fan connector, and then gently disconnect the fan ribbon cable. Then move over to the Wi-Fi antennas and disconnect those. Now you should be able to gently pry up on the motherboard and get it free. Let's now work on the daughter board. Starting out again in the top corner. Remove the 2 green screws that are holding ZL in place and then put those inside another compartment. Then you're going to go ahead and move over to this long silver screw next to the 2 ribbon cables. Then the green screw that's under that, the green screw that holds the speaker in place, and the green screw that is underneath the speaker. We only have 1 screw left, which is underneath this ribbon cable connector. I'm going to go ahead and pry up on that with my ESD tweezers. Gently pull the ribbon cable free, and then the last long silver screw. Now go ahead and lift up on the latch for the analog stick, and gently remove the ribbon cable. Then disconnect the 4-pin cable on the bottom that goes to the backlight of the display, and gently remove that. At this point, you can go ahead and take out the entire daughter board. Remember, I'm doing a shell swap with this installation, so at this point I need to go ahead and transfer over a bunch of stuff to this new shell. If I was not doing a shell swap, I would need to take out this magnesium frame and then remove the screen and then put in my new screen. But this saves us 1 step. So I'm going to go ahead and take my SUPER5 OLED screen, and I'm going to go ahead and seat this inside the front shell, but I have not removed the protective film on the outside, so this will not stick to the front shell. I will do that at a later point. For now, I'm going to go ahead and set that down on the table. It's something in the middle to prop up the screen, and then I'm going to move on to transferring the buttons into this new shell. These analog sticks are pretty worse for wear, so I'm going to go ahead and upgrade those to some Hall sticks for this tutorial. These don't come with this kit, but this is a perfect time to do this kind of an upgrade. We do need to make sure that we transfer over this dust cover to our new shell. I finished the left side of the back over here. I'm going to do the other side after I transfer over this magnesium frame. We have 4 screws that we need to remove to be able to get this out and swapped over. There's 1 over here on the bottom, 1 here on the corner, 1 over here next to the touchscreen ribbon cable, and a longer one over here next to the fan. Now that we have that done, we can go ahead and lift up on the magnesium frame to get it free. I'm going to move this over to the side for now, and now we're going to worry about putting this into our new shell. You'll notice that there is a gap over here on the bottom of the battery. If you do not have this gap on yours, you're going to need to go ahead and use your pry tool to make a small gap in here. But on this one, I'm lucky enough that I have a pretty big gap here, so I'm going to go ahead and feed this 10-pin cable through the bottom of the battery. And as I put the magnesium frame into place, I'm going to go ahead and feed the OLED ribbon cable through the display cutout. And then get everything pushed down. Now we're going to go ahead and put back those 4 screws, starting out with the longest one on the top. Once that's done, we're going to go ahead and put in the 3 smaller screws on the bottom, the corner, and in the middle. Then I'm going to go ahead and transfer over the rest of the buttons to the new shell. From here on, it's pretty much smooth sailing. We're just going to work in reverse, starting with the daughter board, and then we're going to put in the motherboard, connect all of our cables, and then button the entire thing up. Seat the daughter board and make sure to get the analog ribbon cable free, and then we're going to start putting in all the screws in from the bottom to the top. There are two different kinds of screws to contend with here, but it's pretty easy to remember which ones go where. These copper circles over here are going to be fed with the long silver screws. Once you have those two in, then you can go ahead and put in the screws that are around the speaker assembly and then the third screw that holds the speaker in place. Then make sure to gently connect in the bottom ribbon cable. Then we can finish off with our shoulder button. Now we can finally get the motherboard back into place. Get your motherboard. Lift up on the antenna cables. And then carefully get the motherboard into place. Now we don't want to put in any screws just yet. We want to make sure that we get all of our connectors out before we screw in anything, including the touchscreen. I have all my cables free, so now I can go ahead and move over to the 3 silver screws that were removed earlier, 2 that are next to this USB port, and a third one that's behind the fan connector. Now's a good point to pause the installation to go ahead and make sure that there are no issues with the screen itself. I'm going to go ahead and start reconnecting things, starting out with the Wi-Fi cables, then the fan cable, the analog stick, the touchscreen, and then finally the display cable. And this is where you're going to want to take things slowly. This is the only point of failure that you can have in this entire installation. With the entire assembly in one hand, you're going to go ahead and gently fold over the display cable with your other hand, line it up with the display connector, and then very gently push it into place. Now you'll see here that this doesn't perfectly line up, and there are 2 different ways that we can go about handling this. Since I didn't remove the adhesive film protective cover on the display itself, I can fix this by just repositioning the screen. So I'm going to gently lift up on the display, and then I'm going to push it over to the right so that way I can get this cable to be lined up a bit better than it is right now. If you aren't able to get this to line up better by moving the display itself, your next best option is to move the PCB, connect it, and then put the PCB back into place. So I'm going to show you what that would be like right now. I need to remove those 3 screws again. Lift up on the PCB and reposition it so that way the cable is straight. And then gently close the connector. And here's how the cable looks after that. Now we're almost at the point where we can test if the screen works. We're going to go ahead and take our power FPC and this battery connector. Connect the battery connector to the left side. Bend the battery cable over. Connect the other end to the PCB. Connect the daughter board ribbon cable to the motherboard. Gently close the connector. Connect the battery to the ribbon cable. Connect the 10-pin cable. Gently close the latch when it lines up. And then connect the 4-pin cable. You can now try and turn on your device to see if the display is working. You should also press the input buttons while you're doing this on the off chance that the display is not working but the system is on. So if the display is off but the system is running, you will be able to hear yourself unlocking the switch light. And if you can do that but you don't see a picture, then that tells you that there's something wrong with your cables. On this switch light I have a dead battery, so I'm going to go ahead and verify that this screen works by plugging in a cable. And if I see the battery connector in the corner, then I know the display works. Now that I know this display works, I can go ahead and remove the protective film on the bottom of the display so this can properly sit inside the new shell. And doing this is pretty simple. All we have to do is pull up on the tab on the corner and we will be able to remove the film without damaging the display. So that is the top film and this is the bottom film. Then I can press down the corners of the display so it's securely connected. With that done, we can turn our attention to the rest of this installation. I'm going to disconnect the power cable, and then I'm going to gently disconnect this power cable right here that feeds to the motherboard. We're going to start by putting in our shoulder button with 2 green tinted screws. Then we're going to put in a 3rd screw to the right of the analog stick connector, a 4th screw under that, and a 5th screw to the right of that one. Now we are going to reconnect the cartridge slot, gently close the connector, and then screw in the tiny silver screws. Depending on the age of your unit, now is also a good time to repaste your device. The unit that I use in this is about 3 years old, so I should repaste, but I'm not going to, but I just want to say that this is the point where you would want to do it. You should carefully clean off the material that's on the top of the SoC and on both sides of the heatsink, and then reapply the paste in the same spots. For me, I'm just going to keep everything the way that it is because this is not a permanent installation. So I'm going to put the heatsink back into place and then screw in the 3 screws. On the bottom of our power connector, we have double-sided tape. We're going to go ahead and remove the protective cover for that. And then we want to put this on the left corner of this shield. If you want to, now is also a good time to put some tape down on this power FPC so that it will sit flat against your battery. If you don't want to do that, the metal plate will hold it down just as well. Before we finish closing this up, there is one important thing that we still have to do, which is calibrate the display to our liking. We have 2 GPIO buttons on this power FPC, and if we press them, it will change the picture profile. Starting out first with the bottom button because it's easy. If we press this one time, we will be in the sRGB mode. I don't have any content on screen right now, but if I did, it would be very obvious what this does. I happen to like keeping this on the default profile all the time, so I'm just going to go ahead and set this back to the default profile, which is the vivid profile. The top GPIO button customizes the white balance of the display, as well as giving us access to a low brightness mode. There are 4 modes in total, and you can just cycle through and find the one that suits your needs. This is the new low brightness mode, and when you set the display to the lowest level possible, the brightness is going to be near 1 nit. So this profile is perfect for playing at night if you don't want to disturb anybody that's laying next to you. The final profile here is just for version control, so you can just skip that. I like the default profile that this ships with the most, so I'm going to go ahead and just keep that all at stock, but you should just go ahead and pick the profiles that look the best to you. At this point, we're going to go ahead and just close this entire thing up. And it's also a good idea to put some Kapton tape on top of these buttons so you don't have any issues when you're using this. I'm also going to apply some Kapton tape to the top of the 10-pin connector to just keep everything seated nicely. Then we can install the back metal plate, and at this point you would want to apply new thermal paste to the back of this. If you don't, you're not going to have very good thermal performance. I'm not going to be doing that in this video because this isn't a permanent install for me, but if it was, then I would go ahead and just transfer either the stock thermal paste from a fresh Nintendo Switch Lite, or I would apply new thermal paste. But in my case, I'm just going to keep everything the way that it is. There's one final detail to point out about this install. On some shells, this metal plate will cause interference with the edge here, and you won't get it to be able to sit fully flush. We can fix that on this by just breaking off the edge of this metal plate, and then it will allow it to sit flat like it normally would. Since this shell has that issue, I'm going to go ahead and fix that now. Simply take the metal plate and bend it and you should be able to get it off like that. If you had fitment issues like I did, that will fully fix the problem. And there you have it, an OLED replacement for the Switch Lite with a touchscreen. If you have any questions, you can leave those down below and I'll try to get back to you. We still have some other installation tutorials on the way for other versions of this upgrade, so stay tuned for those, and I'll catch you here next time with another one. Happy gaming, everyone. Taki out.